we'll go straight to Mike, and I'll introduce him. Hi, Mike. Can you see me, Mike?
Yes, I can. I can see a wonderful audience as well.
We can see the audience. Excellent. Well, thank you, Mike, for giving us your time generously today. And apologies for the delay and our catastrophes here. But I will leave it straight to you to introduce yourself, although you need no introduction to our audience here today, and let you commence your presentation.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you from the sunny Canary Islands. Otherwise, I would be with you. But on this occasion, I'm probably better off enjoying the sunshine out here. So thank you to Sandy and all others for the invitation to speak to you. So my name is Dr. Mike Yeadon. I am a now retired former pharmaceutical company research executive. I worked in GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, in the biotech sector. I ran my own biotech, Ziarco, and that was acquired by Novartis in 2017. And I went into I would say a semi-retirement. I just consulted lightly at the edges. And after summer 2020, I count myself formally retired because all my clients dismissed me because they didn't want a conspiracy theorist to be advising the board of directors or the CEO of all these biotech companies. So now learning what I've learned, I'm no longer proud of having been in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't know how I didn't realize what it was. And of course, the answer is I was an honest scientist doing my bit, and I kept my head down and my arse up for whatever it was, 27 years. But now I look back at it and think, oh my word, it's not good at all. And like lots of things, I was a total normie till 2020. So just to tell you how normally I was, I listened to BBC Radio 4 every morning for 41 years, and I bought the Sunday Times for most of my adult life. So there you go. But in 2020, so what I'll tell you then just briefly is what I'm going to cover. So I hope I've introduced enough about myself. I was a well-regarded manager and scientist in big pharma and biotech. I was a vice president at Pfizer. After I had left, a former Pfizer board member, Dr. John Lamattina, wrote a nice piece about me in Forbes magazine. So that was 2.5 years, or just under 3 years before the COVID disaster started. I was being written up by someone who was a former Pfizer board member. So the people who say, well, he was an embittered former employee or useless, I honestly don't think either of those could possibly be stood up by the evidence. Not that I'm claiming any special credibility now, having come out of this industry, but I was a decent scientist. And then during my 9 years as an independent, I was hired by 30 small companies, biotech startups. And again, I would say that wouldn't happen if they didn't think I had something to offer them in terms of understanding what would be, basically most of them had raised money with a view to converting an idea into a product that might be bought. Because that build to sell is mostly what biotech does, raises some money, converts a single idea, and if they're right, they get a bidding war and someone buys them. That's what happened to my company. So I was well placed to advise them, and I really enjoyed that. But I wouldn't work in that sector. I wouldn't work in anything that relates to pharmaceuticals anymore. Nor do I recommend anybody take any of them. We can talk about that in Q&A. So I don't think I'm mad. I am properly trained according to what I call old money. The science I was taught, first class honours in biochemistry and toxicology, PhD in pharmacology. I'm no longer sure that very much I was taught is actually true. And in fact, a fairly grand statement, but it's quite useful to hear this, even if you disagree with it. I now conclude that anything of at least moderate importance that everybody has been told that you can't check because it's too far away, too small, or too complicated is a lie. And I know it's a shocking thing to say. I reached that conclusion only in the last couple of years. I ended 2020 saying to my wife, they haven't just lied about PCR or masks, they've lied about everything. And 3 or 4 years later, I realized this extends to almost everything. I've lost credibility with a lot of supporters in the last couple of weeks because I said, I've reached this conclusion by testing it out on a few things. I've looked at the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic that didn't happen. It was inserted into the history books later, and most of the deaths in young, as yet not demobilized servicemen, I think they were killed by injections or overdose. Pattern of deaths is not consistent with influenza, which in any case is not a viral illness and is not contagious. So Spanish flu, I'm completely happy to say, was not a pandemic. And then more recently, I looked at what was alleged to have happened in 1945 over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it really took a few hours before I realized that they had been destroyed by fire bombs, napalm, high explosives, and sulfur or nitrogen mustards to mimic the kind of damage that you're supposed to get if you're exposed to an atom bomb blast. So in 1945, the Americans did not have atom bombs, and I don't think fission weapons are even possible. I don't think they are. And I've heard from a couple of physicists who agree. Anyway, so I started testing things that I thought, well, these must be true. They're so important and everybody knows them. Every time I dug into them, they turned into sand. So anyway, so you won't now be surprised when I tell you, so I've got 3 parts to this. I will briefly go over the crimes perpetrators on us since 2020, and I won't take long because you probably know it personally and very well. I will spend a bit of time talking about the so-called vaccines, because that's what really, I suppose, got me to a point where I didn't worry about what happened anymore. I had to speak out no matter the risks. And that story is continuing to play out, including in courts. And although I'm not optimistic, so I think all of the judiciary everywhere is corrupted, we're still trying, we're still throwing ourselves against the doors on this. And then the final one, which I think is probably maybe much more of what you're about, or partly what you're about with this meeting, my personal concerns about what's happening, digital ID and so on, and what we can do about it. I do think we can divert or delay or defray some of what they're going to bring upon us. I don't kid myself we're going to stop this, but let's give it a good shot. So delay, divert, and defray in some way. So that's what I'm doing. I don't do very many talks these days, so if I go too long, I go off the topic. I'm out of practice. Why? I've done about 350. I can't find about 90% of them. They're censored. So if you're looking for me, you probably already know the kinds of things I speak about. If you're not looking for me, you'll never hear this talk either. So I've reached the point. It's not hopelessness. It's just genuinely pragmatic. It's not worth me doing lots more interviews. Things I recommend was Oracle Films did a really good interview at home and edited it into something we called The Final Warning. It's about an hour long, I think, and you can still find that. And a year ago, I did a shorter recording, I think for Fiona Hine, and it's called The Silver Bullet video. My social media guy, Tim West, suggested that as a name. So Silver Bullet, Final Warning. I don't think I'll be able to say anything I didn't say then, because I've not learned that much more. So briefly then, early in 2020, we were told that there was some frightening new viral respiratory disease in China and spreading towards us. And I will admit, like most people, or many people, I was pretty scared at first because it did sound plausible given my training. And then when I saw, oh, well, it's not a big risk unless you're really quite old. I was 60 then, I'm 65 now. But even then I thought 1% chance of dying, that's not very good. I don't fancy that. So in the first few weeks, I was wiping my shopping down. It's like so embarrassing. I was mopping my shopping down until my wife crossly said, "Stop doing that." She's not a scientist, but she's got a pretty good sense of reality. And I think I was watching TV in the evening one day. I don't know, it might have been January or February. And because I've been around so long, some of my peers, including on this occasion Sir Patrick Vallance, was on the television, and he was then, I think, Chief Scientific Advisor to our Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And he was talking and answering questions, and several times he made answers that I knew that he knew were wrong. And I say that because we trained in the same university system at about the same time, covering similar subjects. And we overlapped each other. When I was about 30, he was at Wellcome to do a PhD. So I wouldn't say I know him well, but I know the basic training. And so I say things like, he knows what I know. And so when he answered a question, several questions just wrongly, I thought, what's going on? And that made me really sit up and pay attention. And then I noticed other public health geniuses like Whitty and Van Tam saying things I knew weren't true. So before lockdown, I didn't know what was going on, but I knew we were being deceived. So I was on high alert. I think by about the summer, that's right, the mega change was in March when lockdown was ordered. And my wife tells me that I spent the rest of the evening running up and down the stairs muttering, "We are in so much trouble." Because I knew you don't shut half the economy over even a bad flu, which is pretty much what they were taping it at. You don't close half the economy. If you reduce economic activity to the extent that would have happened, we know it kills people. Huge numbers of people die. They're like low-lying ships, and if someone then smacks the water, which is like an economic a recession, lots of people who wouldn't have done will then perish. So the government killed people by calling for lockdown. And then I looked around and I noticed what's happening in France and Italy and Germany and America. And I had already read the UK's pandemic preparedness plan. It was quite a short document, I think maybe 10 pages with a few appendices. And in short, it said, in the event there's a particularly serious bout of flu, what we recommend is that if you are ill, that you stay at home until you're better, and that you wash your hands a little more often than usual. That was pretty much all it said. It made no mention of mass testing. It made no mention of masks, except to say they don't work. It definitely didn't mention lockdowns. It explicitly excluded school closures and border restrictions. And I checked with the WHO, that's what their document in 2019 said. So I knew that every country had just thrown their own plans over their shoulder and at the same time, in lockstep, as it were, imprisoned their populations. So by that point, I knew something really, honestly, macabre was going on. And I drew the conclusion that the orders that were being followed came from above the level of nation, because all the countries were doing the same thing in lockstep. And that's true. You don't need an O level in anything to work that out. So I worked that out. And then, of course, it set me on the path of working what the dickens is happening. Through the summer, I think I still thought there was an illness, because we were told there was an illness, and I personally had no way of knowing there wasn't. But I did know that the testing that was being done was nonsense. So I'd never personally done polymerase chain reaction or PCR, but I'd hired people who had done them. So I knew like the basics of it. And I knew that when you do clinical tests, you must always run controls, negative controls. If you don't know what fraction of real or what fraction of false positives. And under FOI, I wrote to everybody that was doing these saying, do you run negative controls? They didn't. And what was your operational false positive rate? They wouldn't tell me. And I knew, therefore, these tests are utterly meaningless. I also realized, because a person who became a friend who had worked in this field in NHS pathology, realised at the end of the spring, all of the testing was swept out of NHS hospital path labs and into newly constructed privately owned facilities, and the door was closed behind them. And even people who were skilled at this were told, no, we don't need you. We don't need anyone. We don't need you to we don't need you to train the staff or any of your people to come on secondment. And they hired people to do the tests who had a science degree, explicitly, who had never worked in labs. That was pretty much the filter, because then they knew they could get them to do anything, and they did. And I had one friend who volunteered to work in one of these lighthouse labs, as they were called, and he had done PCR for 30 years. And he just turned up as a volunteer, and they took him. Day one, he met someone that he and I have never met before, called pipette trainer. So if you're measuring miniature amounts of substance, you use gills and pipettes and others. They have to be calibrated periodically. You have to use them carefully. You can't drop them on the floor like a torque wrench in a mechanics workshop. It'll be wrong after you've done that. And you don't need to be trained to use a pipette, because by the time you get anywhere near using them in anger, you've learned how to use them through laboratory practicals. He and I have never come across a pipette trainer in probably 30 years combined work. And that's because they weren't doing proper science at all. They were hiring pseudoscientists who had gone into, say, finance or phone sales or whatever, and then got them to do what they thought was a scientific procedure. He followed them, and the slapdash procedure was such that even if the PCR test was being done accurately, the level of false positives would fully account for every positive test made. And by the end of the year, I realized they aren't measuring anything. There's nothing. There's nothing at all. It's a fake pandemic. The PCR tests have been designed to give all the false positives they want. If they want more cases, let's do more testing, and then go boo, frighten you on the news. So by the end of the year, I realized we're being lied to in every dimension. I kind of lost the thread about that point, because I had briefly looked at the so-called vaccines, and I remember reassuring my wife. I said, don't worry, it will take them 5 to 8 years. They won't be any use. They won't be any use. And then by about November, it was very clear from the way the politicians were talking that they were actually going to inject people. And at that point, I became agitated and frightened, because, as my former head of chemistry used to say in a politically incorrect era, you can't make a baby in 1 month with 9 women. So you can't shut the steps that you have to do to even test whether something is effective in test tubes and is safe at various stages as you manufacture it. And then as you increase the scale of manufacturing, you have to test everything again and again and again. A friend of mine who worked in manufacturing said that the amount of time to get agreement with regulators on the tests you are doing to quality assure the manufactured product between 1 and 2 years, just to gain regulatory authorization for the methods to assure that you are making what you say you are making. So the idea that they knocked up these vaccines in 11 months, it's for the birds. That means they did not do what they said they did, or they started early. And I think you'll agree with me that both are shocking, aren't they? So they either didn't do what they said, or they started early. I don't know which it is to this day, but they're not vaccines. And of course, having concluded, following Stefan Lanka and other people, that acute respiratory illnesses, colds and flu, are not viral or infectious in nature. And if you attempt to cause transmission, symptomatic contagion from one person with flu to another, it never happens. So despite our strong belief, which I had too, that these are contagious, that is a story. It's been formally examined more than 20 times in published papers from 1918 to 2023, and I have a copy of every one of those papers on my Telegram channel. So if anyone thinks, oh, he's wrong there, I definitely caught it. No, that is the strong impression we get of that phenomenon is, I think, because colds are so common that when you have one, you think, oh, I wonder, it was the guy at the bus stop, or it was the office junior who's coughing, and you never think, well, it was 3 days on one occasion and 3 weeks on the other occasion, and you only scuttle past the person at the bus stop. We make patterns for ourselves, and when people formally examine transmission or contagion, it never occurs. And I'm confident that in acute respiratory illnesses, cold and flu, I've done my homework, and you won't find a single case. So the good news there, folks, is that when they next tell you about bird flu, influenza Z, COVID-95, they're lying. That these things don't occur, they can't occur. It's fear porn, and you're fine. I think there's nothing scary in the natural world. Obviously, don't put your head in a lion's mouth, strong recommendation, but there's nothing scary in the world. Pandemics aren't real, aren't nuclear weapons. What the biggest threat to us? Other people, but not natural diseases. So if we are good to each other and don't take pharmaceutical medicines, and don't eat manufactured food as your sole diet, don't take vaccines either, you'll probably live a healthy and enjoyable life. So that's the background. It was fear-based propaganda. I still don't know entirely why they did it. I don't know why they did it then. There's lots of different possibilities, but in the end, I did conclude this, that they wanted control at the level of the individual, because lockdown, by about the summer of 2020, I thought this is going to be a financially catastrophic event, including for the people who own the assets. They must have been asked for their authorization. It may be them running it, but if not, they must have been asked for their authorization, and they gave it. Now, people who are very powerful, who own central banks and huge corporations, they don't need any more money. They're not interested in money, not even yours. They just don't want you to have it. They don't need money. They have assets and power. They can control the direction of nations quite easily by helping to select and deselect politicians. So when I could see a control agenda, you have to stop doing this, you have to do that. Again, it's control. I thought the only other thing they would want is control at the level of the individual. And I drew that conclusion in June 2020. And I've become ever more convinced that's what they want. They want you, they want me. It can't be for good reasons either. So quickly to the vaccines then. So even at the time, I still thought there was something potentially to vaccinate against, and there isn't, by the way. The disease they said it existed didn't, but even if it hasn't, it wouldn't have been viral, it wouldn't have been contagious. And the people who did this to us knew that, right? They knew that nothing they could give us could possibly save us or save Granny thereby. And yet they went ahead, designed, manufactured, distributed, pretended to get authorization for, and then coerce all the doctors to jam it into your arms. 5.5 billion people. I'm not sure that might be the biggest crime against humanity ever, maybe. When it's not that, I think it's mass vaccination of children for the last several decades. That's probably bigger in terms of harms. So even if there had been an agent against which my old understanding of vaccines could apply, and all of vaccines are now gone as far as I'm concerned, please don't take them, or your pets. I think this whole story of infectious diseases that are contagious, I think the whole thing was invented 100, 150 years ago in order to have a way of frightening us and ultimately bossing us about and ultimately sticking a hollow needle in every single living animal and human on the world. I can't think of any reason why they would have done it. If it was just something you could take on a sugar cube, it'd be different, but no, they're injected with hollow needles. And why is that important? Your skin is a very good defense against topical poisons. Your stomach is a very good defense against topical poisons. If you take something that's quite poisonous, you'll often vomit, even before the contents have left your stomach. If something goes a bit lower, your bowel will siphon in several litres of water and you'll poo it out the back quite quickly. Your body's pretty damn clever. But if you inject something, you bypass every single, your skin, your bowel, your liver, all bypassed. And so you're very, very, very susceptible to an injected poison. So that's why I think they did it. I don't know who they are, I call them the perpetrators. But so even if the concept of vaccination was real, I pointed out there's at least one reason why you shouldn't take it. One, you can't do it in that time. It's not possible. I am one of 5 experts that have been recruited to a case in Leeuwarden, the Netherlands, in which Albert Bourla, Mark Rutte, Bill Gates, and others are defence. They are the accused. I'd love to think we'll win, but our job really is to force into the public domain all of the testimony of 5 people: Sasha Latipova, Catherine Watt, Mike Yeadon, Catherine Austin-Fitz, and Joseph Sansom. And they will all be in affidavits all together with associated videos and their prosecuting attorney's counsel. So, and that will be formally docketed in a Netherlands High Court with a number and a date and accused. So I think they're going to struggle to hide this. And so if we manage to get all of this stuff lodged, it's due before the end of the year, then I'm going to go mad, trying to publicize it. It's very difficult to ignore this. But yeah, so the design of the so-called vaccines, the story we were given, I don't think is true anymore, but you can only go on what they tell you. So I will evaluate what they told us they had done. They said that they had made messenger RNA coding for the alleged spike protein of the alleged virus. So your body would be taught how to recognize this material. And so, the idea was, if you had this beforehand, then your immune system would already be trained. But a number of problems with this, not least the time. The other one is there aren't any products using this technology. None at all. It's a laboratory technique. It was a laboratory technique in the noughties when I left Pfizer in 2011. It was a laboratory technique. And we concluded at the time you would never, ever be able to make this stably enough and reproducibly enough that you could ever use it as a product. And you've got no off switch. If you inject this stuff into people, even if it did what it said on the tin, some people will take it up efficiently and copy it efficiently for a long time. So you could make a mountain of whatever was being coded. Someone else might take up very little of it, copy it inefficiently and for a short time. That's the normal range. That's what human bodies do. So somebody will get much, someone will get that much. That would never make a product that regulators should authorize. So just based on the way they said it works, I knew it was dangerous. But in practice, the mRNA products from Pfizer and Moderna, they wrapped them in a vehicle, an excipient called lipid nanoparticles, with at least 2 problems. One is the lipid nanoparticles themselves have never been given to humans before. They do not have an authorization to administer them willy-nilly to the public. They don't have generally recognized as safe or GRAS status. So each one of them should have been tested as if it was a new chemical entity, and they weren't. So the breaches of decades worth of regulation, left, right, and center, it's a criminal enterprise. But here's the other thing about lipid nanoparticles. Lipid nanoparticles have been used for years in research labs as a way of depositing big molecules into ovaries. So if you took this so-called mRNA and wrapped it in lipid nanoparticles and injected it to girls or women, my confident prediction was it would be disproportionately deposited in their ovaries. Why would anyone want to do that, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we know the answer, don't we? We now know the answer. And I ended up with about 4 or 5 ghastly certainties. I had a training in mechanistic toxicology, which is very unusual. My university had 3 people who are professors who were not only interested in toxicity, but why it occurred at a molecular level. So it meshed perfectly with my biochemistry degree. So I had some training from some of the best minds in industrial toxicity, trying to work out what had happened after the fact. Mostly people just want to sweep it up and go away. You can imagine why the commercial entities want to do that. So I have a good understanding of what it is about molecules if there are risks that would convey harms. So that's the skill I use, and decades of experience working in pharmaceuticals where the last thing you want to do is harm people. So if there are characteristics about the molecule that you think, oh, that could be a problem, then you would point it out before you've gone far in the project, or if it was still there at the end, you'd say, we need to do additional tests to rule in or rule out this concern. And often we would kill molecules before getting to humans based on someone like me having spotted a potential problem and they confirmed it. Other times it was like, oh, it doesn't actually occur. It looks like something poisonous, but it is not on this occasion. So you're just looking at similarities and differences between chemical structures. So I'm afraid, armed with what I know, I am formally certain, and I will say, the injections that they pretended were vaccines were intentionally designed to injure, kill, and reduce fertility in survivors. It's a shocking thing. I don't say it with the intention of frightening people, although of course I'm well aware it will do that. But I would say, I never said, some people attributed to me remarks like, oh, they'll all be dead in 5 years. I have never said that. I do not believe that. I thought not many people would die, because as I thought about this more and more, I thought they're getting us used to the idea of rolling up our sleeves whenever they bark at us. And then they're going to do this repeatedly. And then this becomes a way of, frankly, culling the population with plausible deniability. I do think that's what they're going to do. And I think 1% of people or 2% of people might have died. I'm not up with the numbers, so if I'm wildly wrong, apologies. That's not been my focus. And probably 10 times that number have been injured, some of whom have recovered, others have not. But they have not, I do not believe it was intended that they would depopulate the planet based on COVID jabs. I do think, and I'm going to come to it now, I do think they want to use this. When I say they, the perpetrators, which is why there's 150 years of lying about it. Actually, I'll just drop in a little anecdote, because it's one of the ways I got to this interpretation, that what other product of the pharmaceutical industry than vaccines, what other product, what other category can you not question or criticize? The answer's none. But this is the only one. You cannot question it. You cannot challenge it. If you are a professional, and I don't mean just a doctor, if you're a dentist and you speak in a way that would be classed as anti-vax, and you do it persistently, or you're an architect or a bus driver, anything. If you keep going, if you are in a profession, your profession will contact you to say, we've heard this, that, and the other about you. We're concerned that if you continue, you may be at risk of bringing your profession to disrepute. And this could have impact on your registration and your ability to practice. And that's true. You don't have to be a doctor. You could be anything. You could be a lawyer, an estate agent. Almost every profession has some body that you're required to be a member of. And that is the script that almost anyone who persistently goes, well, I don't know about these injections, I'm not going to give them to my children, and I don't think you should either. If you are persistent and you're professional, they'll come after you. Why is that? They don't do that about Lipitor or cholesterol-lowering drugs or anti-asthma drugs or heart drugs. They don't, do they? You can criticize those. No one even gives you a call. If you criticize or question vaccines persistently, what I've described to you occurs, that you will lose your registration and you'll be fired, like David Cartland or several friends of mine that have had to relinquish their professional licenses. And so I think that's part of the evidence that this is a long run plan to use this as a weapon, because it makes no sense that they would spend this much effort defending these products. Anyway, probably talked enough about vaccines. So on to my last main bit. So of course, through 21, I was just talking out saying, please don't take these injections, and then later on, probably later in that year, certainly by 2022, it was like, you don't need these vaccines because there isn't anything to protect yourself against. And that is the position I falteringly arrived at, I think, in 2022. And I'm very confident now that there is no such thing. These submicroscopic infectious particles called viruses are fraud. That not a single one of them has ever been isolated. All of the claimed isolations are themselves bad science. They lack controls, and when you do the controls, the result accounts for exactly the effect that is claimed to be due to the Weevil virus or beta 7 virus or whatever it is. So there's no scientific evidence for the existence of any virus. It means all the illnesses that are attributed to them, of course, are real, but are caused in some other way. And I mentioned earlier that, at least in my own field of expertise, respiratory, that they are not contagious. So of course that makes all of vaccines, in my view, deeply suspect, and so I wouldn't recommend you use them. So what was all of this about? I was thinking about control, and it didn't take long. That evil creature Tony Blair, I believe, was on the television during the first year, saying something like, well, we need to have a way of knowing who's been vaccinated and who's not been vaccinated. So he was suggesting some sort of digital record of that. And I was like, well, why the hell would you care, Tony, whether I've been jabbed or not? If you've been jabbed and protected, why the dickens would you care whether I have? So the whole idea of vaccine passports, the whole idea is completely barking, isn't it? If these things protected you, you do not care whether the person near you is jabbed or not. So please, if anyone suggests vaccine passports, the entire thing is a macabre circus. It doesn't even pass. I remember saying to my daughter, you don't need an A-level in such. She said, you don't need any kind of qualification. You just need logic. So I knew Blair was back on his ID trick. Anyway, I hadn't noticed him trying to do it previously, but I was reminded of it, and yes, he had. And then it became very clear that lots of senior leaders at United, basically above the level of nation, the UN people, the World Economic Forum level, all these people, they wanted digital ID in vaccine passports. And here's the bit I just need to remind you. You do not need a new method to identify yourself. Evidence your entire life to this moment, right? You don't need a new ID. If you need to identify yourself, you probably have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways of doing it. So you don't need a new way. So if someone turns up and insists that you do, repeat that mantra back to them. I do not need a new method of identifying myself in order to lead a peaceful, law-abiding life. Get out of here. Get out of here. I'm not signing up. If you sign up for it, so who does want you to have the digital ID? The people who want to control you need you to have it. The people who want to control you need you to have it, because then they can control everything about you. And some people say, oh, it doesn't matter if you have a new one. Your passport's already a digital ID. Yeah, it is. It's deliberate that they've used the same words, digital ID, for two things that are completely different. So the new digital ID is, I probably described this wrongly, so I'm not a computer person, but essentially it's an address. It's an address to, like, if you think of it as an address to like a repository of information about you. And your passport is not that. It's a repository to just your passport information and nothing else. And it can't even be edited very greatly. It can include when you cross borders, it'll probably record that. But it doesn't record whether you bought a steak or whether you drove up the M6. But your new digital ID will be geolocated. It will know where you are, what you just bought, what you bought previously, it will say your credit record or your credit rating, the bank balance that you have, any things you've said bad about the government, any medical records, vaccine passports. Basically, this new digital ID is different in two mega ways. One is, I believe functionally, it's an address to everything about you, and nothing else you've ever had is. And not only is it a repository to everything about you, it is updated in real time. So if you're told you're not allowed to leave your house, Yeadon, or you're not allowed to go further than 15 minutes from your home, they'll know. If you step 16 minutes away from home, they will know. And for example, if you then wanted to buy a bottle of water, you go into a shop, of course, at this point, you'll have no cash, and you try and buy something, the merchant will say, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to sell that to you, your ID is invalid. So that's what it's going to be used for. So you don't need it, you can already identify yourself. So please, please, pretty please, and please again, don't sign up for digital ID, this new one. If you do, I'm not threatening you, I'm pointing something out. If you do, I'm going to explain to you why it's going to be the last really important decision you ever get to make. It's the last really important decision you ever make, because the perpetrators don't need anything from you after that, nothing. If you sign up for digital ID and other people around you do, here's how it goes. You and I could work out 6 methods to delete cache in the next few minutes. You might think, well, how will they do that? Well, they could just announce it. They could just announce it. Sorry, it's an ins cache. They won't probably do that, but they could make it harder to get by just taking out half of the remaining cache points, maybe 3/4 of them, and have the other ones broken down. It's not the government's fault, is it? Then it might make it more and more difficult to spend money, and some shops will say, I'm sorry, we don't take cash. It's not their fault, it's not the government's fault. Very easy to get rid of cash. If they need any incidents, get rid of cash. De La Rue prints almost all the banknotes in the world. They just need a fire at their facility. Oh, sorry, can't print any 10 or 20 pound notes. Don't know how long it will be before we manage to remanufacture the plates, maybe 6 months, by which time we've forgotten all about cash. So it's so easy to get rid of cash. So imagine now with digital ID, and you're required to present it. Every merchant, if you go and look and ask, see if you can scare them. Big shops already have an NIR reader, National Identification Register reader, NIR reader, in all big stores. And you will be required to present your digital ID in some form. Otherwise, they say, I'm sorry, the sales register won't open for the transaction. You have to, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. That's where the way the software's made. Can't sell you petrol. Beep. You have to beep the thing open. And because you won't have cash, you'll only have electronic money. If there was a rule brought out that says you can only buy 50 litres of diesel every month, and you bought 50 litres of diesel 2 weeks ago, your restrictions are crazily personal. They're not the same restrictions as the next guy in the line, or your neighbour, or anyone else in your family. Isn't that awful? But so then we won't even be able to help each other. It's like, help me, folks. It's like, I'm all right. You know, that's the problem. That divide and rule is unbelievably, crazily personal, because this digital ID, you might be too far from home. Someone else has bought too much diesel. A third person has bought one steak too many. You know, you get the idea. So if you sign up for digital ID, they will remove cash. And then whoever is operating this bloody algorithm, I don't know, is it Facebook? Is it the US military? I neither know nor care. Whoever is operating it can set the algorithm for everyone or for certain categories of people or just me in such a way that our lives are totally controlled. Can't buy anywhere, anything can't go anywhere. And you'll need to use it to log on to the internet, so you won't be able to say anything or even watch anything without them knowing. So this is what I think they're going to do, because I really couldn't think of a more effective method of human control. So they're going to try and make it very difficult for you to refuse. Is it going to be painful for you to refuse? Yeah, it is. There's no easy way now. We've got nearly 6 years down the road. There's no wide path. There's no easy path for us now forward. So is it going to hurt? Yeah. Am I not going to sign up? No, I'm not going to sign up. Even if I'm told you will have no access to your money, so be it. Because, I think you've heard me argue, if you sign up, it's the last thing you'll ever decide. Because here's the next thing. Say it's a year on. Say they've got it working and almost everyone's gone for it. And they say, there's another pandemic, according to Dr. Tedros. Luckily, our friends in the pharmaceutical industry have rushed up a new jab. They said 90 days, is it? Yeah, 90 days. So if you need to get your jab in the next 90 days when it's available, when you're called. Otherwise, your digital ID will become invalid or will reduce its privileges. So who's going to refuse now? See, your pay, your benefits, buying petrol, moving, buying anything, getting online, all requires a valid one of these that you've allowed ourselves to be mugged into. You're going to go and get. You'll probably reason, I'll probably be all right with the jab, and it'll keep my life going. I'll go and get the jab, and that's what will happen. And then imagine another 6 months after that, the government says, we only care for your well-being, and digital ID, it's working pretty well, but there's been a distressingly large number of incidents where people have hacked other people's digital ID and essentially either made an edit to it that's inconvenienced you, so it didn't work, or they pretended to be you, something like that. So they said, as from 3 months' time, mobile phone-based digital ID will no longer be recognised by the NIR readers. Instead, what will be recognised by the NIR readers are these small RFIDs that will be placed subcutaneously, painlessly under your skin. So please transition from mobile phone to the RFID, and I think most people would go and get it. So I think if you take digital ID, within a couple of years, you'll be chipped. I wish I was wrong, and I'm not. So I'm going to stop there and take any questions that you can throw at me. It's not being funny. It's not being funny.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. Your understanding and projection of what is looking like is inevitable is very clear. So thank you for expressing that. You've left me, though, with a lasting impression of you mopping your groceries at the start of the pandemic. So at least I can be forgiven as well.
Yeah, no, it took me a while not to be a normie. The funny thing is, just very briefly, that I was laughed at by colleagues. I never bought the theory of evolution. I thought it adequate. I think Darwin's finches and so on described local adaptations to different environments. Deep water, shallow water, deep mud, worms in shallow or deep mud. But I said to people, I don't believe you can create a new species or a new organ in this way, because the intermediate forms would always fail. And my friends would go, "Don't be stupid. What are you, some kind of a anti-science nut?" And I'd say, "Thank God I don't work in evolution." But I think I knew that was wrong, but I never joined any dots. So more fool me, the greater fool. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, we haven't got a microphone to pass around the audience. But if you have a question, certainly if it's easy, could you come to the microphone and ask the question? Who's got the first question? We'll start at the front, and if you come and queue up afterwards, if people like to queue, what we'll try and do, Mike, is I'll try and point the camera, which you see, at the person, the other microphone, so you can see the person asking the question.
And just let me know. I'm quite happy to do Q&A for as long as you want to, but maybe you need to get on with your next speaker, so you can just press the button and turn me off. Hello.
Hi, Mike. My name's Andy. Thank you so much for a really incredible talk and for what you do for us. Quick question. You can't trust everything you see on social media, but I may have seen a video of you talking about ivermectin and how we shouldn't take it, particularly for fertility reasons. And that concerns me. Could you talk about that, please? And I'm going to go and sit down now.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will talk about it very briefly. There was no pandemic. There was no new disease called COVID-19. So you didn't need to take anything, ivermectin or not. Okay, so my biggest concern about ivermectin, and I'm sorry, it's every person who's pushed it and become famous as a result of it is not my friend, because if there wasn't a pandemic, why were you pushing a pharmaceutical? Did you know that the prescriptions, the sales of ivermectin increased, I think, 9-fold between 2019 and 2021? And my experience of the industry, this is a patent expired drug. And I would say this is not an organic phenomenon. The supply chain to create 10 times more ivermectin per week, per month than in prior years, it requires a long lead time. Somebody knew they were going to push that on the human population because those demands were both stoked by perpetrators, amplified by collaborators of the perpetrators, and were funded by the pharmaceutical industry itself. So even if it was totally safe, you should be worried about it based on what I just told you. It's been that the sales tells me it was forced. The lead time required to make 10 times more of a fine pharmaceutical is substantial because it involves a fermentation step, which most generics companies do not have. So you have to build a fermentation plant. You're not going to do this in a couple of weeks. So in my opinion, they always plan for humans to use it in large quantities. They would pretend it was no good for a disease that doesn't exist and then have other people pushing it for a disease that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, every third advert on your mobile and your laptop was pumping where you could get it. So the idea that it was suppressed, everywhere I looked, it was advertised on every device. So anyway, so it matters not whether I was right or wrong about impacts on fertility, and I frankly wouldn't take it at all, let alone for that reason. But my experience of the industry tells me it was pushed on you PSYOP fashion, and I can see all of the evidence of the preparation required to do that. So if you still want to take it, fine. If you are at a stage in your life where reproduction isn't an issue, then anything I said about that's irrelevant. So, but my fear was people who were kind of sussed enough not to take the jabs, maybe many of them fell for the I'll take hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, PSYOP. Remember, there was nothing to treat. And there were lots of very famous doctors pushing these things on you. And I'm afraid to say these people are still doing so. None of them, to my knowledge, have ever said, I got it wrong, there wasn't a pandemic. None of them. If you want to trust them, be my guest. I have not monetized anything I've ever done. I've anti-monetized it. I've made sure I can't make anything. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of my own money, and I actively don't want to make anything so that no one can accuse me of having a financial motive. I'm afraid that's not true of those I am impliedly criticizing, all of whom have made a ton of money either selling ivermectin or products associated with it. So it's up to you. You can make your own mind up. You don't have to believe me, but if you want to believe people who are being paid to lie to you about something that may or may not be okay, that definitely provided through a run-in, a lead time to manufacture far more of it, then be my guest. So yeah, and there are papers that suggest at high doses, when taken with other so-called supplements, which inhibit the metabolism of it, the levels can be increased, and that can have bad effects on fertility, certainly in animals. So I would say, why take the risk?
Okay, thank you, Mike, for that insight into ivermectin. The next question, please, from this gentleman.
I'm amazed at the question.
Yeah, Mike, I'm just kind of curious. You're banned from everywhere. You can't be found anywhere, YouTube, X, whatever. How come some people are banned and others aren't? For example, I see Malhotra, Robert Malone, and others. They're allowed to give evidence to Congress, etc., and we see them everywhere. Have you got any ideas why that might be?
Oh yes, yeah, I know it's a leading question, but so a couple of things I want to say, because I'm probably going to fail to mention them. About the digital ID thing, it's all very well for me to exhort everybody not to take it. I think the powers that be will try and create an event or a series of events that will make it harder for you to resist. And I think some of those, I don't know what it's going to be, but some of them might be a food supply chain shock. So if you haven't already stocked up enough tinned food, dried food, and so on, so that you could survive for whatever, a few weeks, whatever you've got room for and money to buy. If you do that and there is a shock, you can stay safe. You won't need to go out into the melee. You won't need to end up signing up for some digital ID. So that's one thing. The other thing, I do think, I watch lots of very clever people, much cleverer than me, on finance, and they believe that all of our fiat currencies, pounds, euros, dollars, yen, and so on, are being destroyed by overproducing the money, and its value is falling away. And there's like a tottering, vertiginous heap of derivatives and derivatives squared and so on. We remember the 2008 financial crisis. There are people, again, I'm not an expert in this area at all, but they say the circumstances that led to 2008 are 100 times or 1,000 times worse now. And I think someone will push the Jenga bricks over, and all your savings will go, your pensions will go, and so then they can save us with central bank digital currencies. So if you've got any money at all, even a few £100, go and buy some small denomination silver coins. If you've got a bit more money, buy some small denomination gold coins. Now you might think, I can't possibly buy enough to make a difference. I say, yes, you can. Imagine everyone's got a few £100. Imagine everyone's got a few £100 of silver. It will circulate instead of having to bow down to the god of digital money. And so those are the two things I recommend. That you've got almost nothing to lose at this stage. A little bit of supplies, food and water to get by a discontinuity, and some low denomination silver and gold, whatever you would like to save from the banking inferno. And at that point, you can just sit back and you won't be able to shop in Waitrose with it. I do understand that. But I'm pretty damn sure that as soon as the discontinuity, the informal economy will restart. It probably already exists. So while I intentionally wanted to, as it were, scare people, I don't want to terrify you into immobility. And there's two things you can do on food supplies and money, which, please, if you do that, I think we can, to use the expression my daughter will use, will F them off. If enough of us don't sign up for this wretched digital ID, they will have to become aggressive. And if they do that, wake up loads more people than I ever could. So that's my recommendation. Yes, I am heavily censored. I'd recommend that you use minority browsers like Yandex, Yandex. You can find 20 or 30 of my talks, but if you search using Google or Safari, Chrome, whatever it is, you'll only find Yeadon as a conspiracy lunatic. So much of my stuff is hidden, but it can be found if you're smart and box clever and just use the minority search engines. That's because the majority search engines have been they've been hampered. So subjects they don't want you to find, they've deliberately diverted the products of search. So I'm afraid the bottom line is that the people who are allowed to speak are in some way assisting the perpetrators. They are in some way assisting the perpetrators. Although most of the people you mentioned have done wonderful work in revealing, telling us things that we needed to know. But they are helping the perpetrators in one way, shape or form, I think often they will leave unchallenged the virus contagion vaccine trio. I think that's what most of them, they won't tell you that this virus contagion vaccine trio is all a lie to get a needle in you. They won't do that. So I think that's why they're allowed.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right.
Well, thank you for that, Mike. Thank you very much. Now, just very, very briefly, Mike, you're probably aware that a few weeks ago, I think it was, directors in the UK for UK corporations were required to obtain a digital ID. And of course, they get the directors of the company. The next moves, the directors will be forced to implement this on the staff.
Yeah.
So it's already underway. And I don't know how many, were people in the audience aware that directors were now required? Yes. Is anybody a director here? And what's your solution? Close your company down. You can decline it, the way is out of it. For myself, my solution is not to run a corporation. Stand outside in the private.
You can still confirm your identity in manual way, right?
Of course, of course.
So yes, I did the same. I had two limited companies that I would regard as end of life. So we had our accountant certify our identity using documents they'd seen already. So there was no new account formed, and our intention between now and the next year is we're applying for voluntary strike off of both of them. So I won't be running a limited company.
But if we now start to trade in the private, then we're actually getting a benefit out of it. And that economy is growing.
Yeah, and also when it comes to next year, I'm told, I may have this wrong, maybe it's the year after, eventually you'll have to file, in order to file tax returns, I think they say you'll have to do digital ID, and it's like, they can whistle. They can whistle. I am going to file my tax return in one way, shape or form, and I'm going to send them the money to HMRC Cumbernauld, and I'm going to keep a receipt. So if they then are angry with me, you can tell it's purely procedural, not because I'm not declared taxable income and paid the tax. And at that point, is the judge really going to fine me? If they do, I'll pay it. Right? It's like, I'm not doing it, Your Honour. And if they go, well, anyway, so I think we should do that. So just don't bend your head.
It's in the numbers. If we can get the numbers to do the same, they'll have to bow. That's simple.
Exactly. They will have to, like they did with the NHS 100K. They will back down.
Yeah, brilliant.
Force them.
Mike, we will wrap it up there. So thank you with great gratitude from here in Stroud. We have a full auditorium. I don't know whether you could see it properly from the camera, but we've probably got 100 people in here, and it's packed, sold out. So with much gratitude, we'll sign off there. I'll say thank you from me, and I will point the camera back to the audience so they can wave and say goodbye to you as well. So blessings from me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheerio. Thanks everybody for listening to this conspiracy lunatic. Bye-bye.